Holodeck 3 program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
One, engage!
All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Lower Decks edition. We are back. We
Hooray!
are now a part of the Lower Decks crew. We are on cleanup duty. We're cleaning out the jizz stains out of the holodeck like Boimler.
Oh, that's horrible.
Well, listen, if episode 2 is any proof, I mean, people be fucking in there and doing some crazy shit.
Well, that's what makes it even worse. I mean, that stuff he was cleaning up, I'm like, who the hell is spraying that everywhere?
Give me a second. I gotta fix your camera
All right.
on the studio. Sorry, YouTube
Yes.
people.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just witnessed camera placement.
A little behind the scenes in the studio.
Yeah. All right. So there's a lot going on in Lower Decks territory. A lot of frenetic energy. That's
Yeah,
what
it's
this
back.
show is known for, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to be discussing, obviously, the inaugural episodes. We are breaking them down and breaking them up. So we're not going to discuss episode 1 and 2 all in one discussion, even though they were released at the same time. So for this specific discussion, we will be focusing our attention on the very first episode of season 4, titled Twovix.
Twovix.
The episode's directed by Barry J. Kelly and Jason Zurich. This episode was just so hardcore, they needed 2 directors to handle
Apparently.
the directing duties. The episode itself was written by the showrunner himself, Mike McMahon. The synopsis: the Cerritos ensigns must assist a caretaker on the voyage of a historically significant starship. A new season of Lower Decks, or I should say this new season of Lower Decks, didn't hold back. It jumped immediately into the realm of self-referential indulgence by parodying various aspects of Star Trek Voyager.
Yes.
Dave, I expected as much because there was an interview with the show's showrunner, Mike McMahon, I want to say a few weeks back, where he said he was aware that they've been neglecting certain shows like Voyager and Enterprise as it pertains to referencing.
Yeah.
And he was going to remedy that with the new season. And he certainly did.
Yes, he did.
He certainly did. The setup being that a caretaker is essentially turning Voyager into a museum. Now, for this to make sense of in terms of in-universe chronology, we can take a look at a few dates because the events of Lower Decks and the ending of Voyager almost perfectly align. Star Trek Lower Decks takes place between the years 2380 and 2381 so far. Star Trek Voyager's return home happened around 2378.
Yeah, just like 2 years earlier.
Yeah, so it definitely works when it comes to in-universe canon and chronology. Now, David, briefly, how did you feel about the return of Lower Decks?
You know what? I was really happy because, just like you said, the energy of Lower Decks was back.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this is going to be this was actually a stronger opening than some of their past season openers. Remember, like a couple of those season openers we've had in a couple of their seasons, we said, oh, they're starting off very slow. They're, trying to find their footing. Mm-hmm. Here, they went right for it. They went for the jugular when it came to their writing style. So it felt like nothing has changed energy-wise and pacing-wise when it comes to delving out their story for an episode. I like the fact that basically they decided to bring in, like Voyager references because, unfortunately, yeah, Voyager in this day and age, a lot of people used to say, oh, Deep Space Nine was actually being treated as the redhead stepchild. But Voyager and Enterprise, for some strange reason, the last probably 4 years, is now treated as the redheaded stepchild of the entire franchise.
You're right. Deep Space Nine over the last 20 some years has found itself.
Yeah.
Like there are new audiences, and also former, long standing Star Trek fans that really snubbed Deep Space Nine when it originally was airing, and now retrospectively they've gone back and said, okay, you know what, this actually isn't that bad, this is pretty damn good. But Voyager and Enterprise still have not reached that.
Oh, especially Enterprise gets so much shit, and it's like, even for me, because remember when we first started the show, I did not like Enterprise.
Yeah, and listen, David, without anyone please trying to seek me out and murder me, Voyager, in a lot of ways, is actually stronger, wait for it, than a lot of the earlier runs, the earlier seasons of The Next Generation.
Yes. I 100% agree with you.
And that's not me saying I don't love TNG. Everyone should know by now that I fucking adore TNG. But just in the light of fairness, comparatively speaking, Voyager went there. They went into original, unique, and just like this episode said, what was it? Freaky, bizarre things that they made work. I mean, the original series did that. They did some strange things as well. But in a lot of ways, that was just the times, the 1960s. Yes. It was the pulpy style. Voyager went into some weird areas and used philosophical aspects to flesh out character development.
Oh, very deep.
The idea of doppelgangers was used a lot in Voyager, to the point to where it felt nihilistic at times. So Voyager has never been judged fairly.
Yeah.
So I'm all about some Voyager references. I think Voyager deserves that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because especially like when you take into context what Lower Decks was trying to harken back on, one of the more interesting episodes, in my opinion, of Voyager is the one where Neelix and Tuvok get merged together.
Such a disturbing and sad episode.
It's so disturbing because it taps into a lot of things about Star Trek that are kind of taboo. Number one,
murder?
Transporter. Well, number one, murder. But number two, transporter. What the transporter can do to a person. The number one fear. Yes, it's ridiculous how Bones basically says, I will never step into a freaking transporter. It messes up your molecules. Well, in this episode, it's proven true. It can mess up your molecules.
This has been a point of phobic nuance in Star Trek for decades. The idea of the transporter. And even though Bones was, it was a little superficial statement because it was for fun. And of course you had that moment in the motion picture that they wanted to sell.
Oh my God, yeah.
They have always, Star Trek as a whole, even during the run of the original series, and we've talked about this book now numerous times, the book titled Spock Must Die.
Spock Must Die, yeah.
Delves into these phobic ideas pertaining to the transporter and what it can and can't do, or even better question, what it should and shouldn't do.
Yes.
And whether or not these people, when they go from one side to another, they're being dematerialized and then rematerialized. Are they even the same person?
Yeah.
These are some really heavy philosophical ideas to delve into, and they have always masked it with an air of a phobia, a fear as well.
Well, also in TNG, when they touched on it, it's more done like almost comedic value too, because like those were the episodes that were famous for our favorite side character in TNG, Barclay. Usually those were done in jest and, like mishaps. It was the mishap episode of the week. Voyager, something about that writing staff in Voyager decided to take, while everyone in Star Trek tried to put a light tone to it, no, Voyager decided, no, we're going to embrace the darker nature of this theme.
You know what it was? I found the word for it. Or words, phrase. Body horror.
Yeah.
They delved into the areas of body horror and how it pertains to transporters. Not just transporters, but numerous things. That planet where they landed their ship and they essentially replicated themselves.
And then the replicants were devolving.
They were like silver people. Remember, they were made of like a metallic substance. Yeah, Voyager was very bizarre, and that's why when they said that in this episode, freaky moments.
Freaky moments.
I was like, yeah, that's a good way to define various aspects of Star Trek Voyager. So in this episode, we were given some very funny moments where they very quickly and succinctly touched on those various freaky moments in Voyager. The title of season 4 premiere itself, along with the subplot where members of the Cerritos crew merge into hybrid personas such as T'Ana and Billups, forming Tulips, serves as, I guess you could say, like a nostalgic reference to the contentious Star Trek Voyager episode. And I say contentious because it's very controversial. Titled Twovix, as we had mentioned.
Yes.
In this narrative, in this episode, or that episode, I can't talk. I apologize, everyone. We've already done 3 hours of shows prior. The Neelix, the Talaxian morale officer, if people are not familiar with Voyager,
I want to be a morale officer.
you would be a good morale officer. Not a good moral officer.
Yeah,
but a
morale.
morale officer, yes.
Sex for everybody.
Yeah, see, that's why you wouldn't be a good moral officer. But morale-wise, hey, a little bit of sex helps everyone.
Exactly.
So you had the Talaxian morale officer, Neelix, and then the Vulcan security chief, Tuvok. They underwent this fusion during a transporter accident that results in the creation of a character named Twovix. In due course, a method is discovered to return Neelix and Tuvok to their distinct physical and mental states. However, prior to this resolution, Twovix contends that he has evolved into a complete and unique individual, asserting that restoring Tuvok and Neelix amounts to extinguishing his existence through a form of murder.
Yes. And think about it. That is one of the cool things in Voyager that I've always found is Janeway was the perfect captain to deal with these scenarios.
Didn't they say that in this episode, that she doesn't mess around?
She doesn't mess around.
Or she's hardcore or something to that effect?
Yeah. In the episode, they're right. Because Janeway's not your normal captain. She doesn't look at the crew as like officers and a military thing. She looks at them as they're her family.
Well, she became more of a matriarch because the nature of the setting of the show and being isolated as they were.
And when you think about it, a matriarch, a mother type of character would actually make the decisions that Janeway did.
Or a leadership by a woman. You know what I mean? I'd rather probably that rather than a mother.
Yeah. But like that in itself is what made that episode interesting, because I remember so many people were like, so many Star Trek fans hated Janeway because she basically took the moral dilemma and took the hard decision, kill Twovix, kill Twovix, essentially, because she needed to save Neelix and Tuvok. Those were more important to her than Twovix, which brought up such a moral dilemma with Star Trek fans at the time, because they're like saying no Star Trek captain worth their salt would make that decision like that.
Yeah, but that's why it's posed. A lot of the best Star Trek episodes are designed as questions.
Yeah.
They leave it open-ended for the fans to debate. Was this the right decision? Was it the wrong decision? Because where do you go in a situation like that? Do you allow two members of your crew to just cease to exist?
Cease to exist, yeah.
Even though you have the means to bring them back into existence and to live? Or do you take an accident that never should have been and allow them to perish? I don't think there really is a right or wrong answer. That's the thing about morality in the philosophical context.
Yes. And that's what made Voyager really cool when it hit on all cylinders like that. Because if you look at all the episodes that where Voyager, or like the whole story of the Voyager crew, made the audience question their own morals, that's when Voyager really hit it out of the cylinders. The Twovix episode, the Neelix episode where he has that existential crisis of death.
Which they didn't.
Oh
they
my
didn't
God.
use that episode as a reference. There was a
It's
lot.
so hard to use it. How do you do that, Mike? how do you basically say, yeah, there's no afterlife in
Or
this
reanimate dead people that
Reanimate
had
dead
died from
people.
like a nuclear holocaust.
Exactly.
Dude, Voyager did some twisted shit, dude.
They did some messed up, questionable things, but when you look at the dilemma, Janeway made the right call every single time. It was the hard call to make.
Well, that's the interesting part about her character. That's why I said a couple years ago during some discussion, I said that she is never really put in the running for the best captains. Now, it's natural to put her in the list of captains. Well, these are the 5 or however many captains we have. But everyone always goes to Picard.
Oh, yeah.
Picard's the best. It used to be Captain Kirk. It slowly has morphed into being Picard. But very few people say Janeway is the best captain. And I'm not one to rate captains because I think each captain is very distinct in the way they were executed in television and movies. I don't think there's a single captain that you can point to and say they're similar. So it's kind of hard to rate individuals who are all extremely different. However, if we had to, Janeway is in the top running.
Oh, easily. Because the thing I always tell people nowadays, especially when they ask me who's my favorite captain, I preface it as
Burnham.
I basically tell people who's the captain I want to be following. That's who that's why I'm choosing. Janeway is actually my number 1. Cisco's actually number 2.
Well, Jerry Ryan 7 is now a captain, so
Oh,
I might want to follow her
Well, you know,
closely.
the problem.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't know what Jerry Ryan's going to do for her crew. I mean, you know, we got to see.
If I was an Admiral Starfleet at the end of Picard season 3, I'd be like, all right, 7, you're a captain now. And just for nostalgia and shits and giggles and my own sick depravity, I want you to go ahead and wear the old uniform you used to wear.
Here you go.
It's now,
Please. Please.
it's now regulation.
It's now regulation. That'd be so messed up. And all of a sudden, wait, why doesn't all the other captains wear this? No. It's okay. It's all right. Here, it's
imagine Captain Lorca wearing regulation. Here you go. Put this on.
But like,
He would go to the mirror universe immediately.
exactly.
He'd go back.
But
He would
that's
abandon all plans. He's like, what did I do?
that's why when they mentioned Janeway being a hard ass, I was like, yeah, you're right. She was, but she'd be the captain that I would want.
Yeah.
Because hey, at least Janeway's gonna basically choose my well-being over everything else.
That's true. All right, so let's briefly go through the list of references because that's really what this episode was more or less about. It was all references. So the Twovix versus Twovix we've already gone into. There's the Michael Sullivan aspect, which is the holographic character that kept telling Mariner that he loves her.
Yes.
This character in Voyager was basically, and this isn't a joke, he was basically Janeway's sex toy.
Yes. I mean, he's the one.
If vibrators and dildos were a thing in the future in Star Trek, this is the embodiment, the manifestation, because there's a moment where she literally creates
Yes.
her object of love. And it's not object of lust.
There you go. That's a better way of putting it.
She fell for this character's appearance at first. She said she found him attractive. So much so that she then decided to start tweaking the program. I believe she made him taller.
Yes,
She gave him different hair. She gave him, I believe, some stubble.
Yes,
Like
because remember, she at one point she said, "Computer, make him taller."
And he was also married, I believe. And she said, "Computer, make him not married."
Yes,
So she shaped this person to be the perfect person that she would, in fact, have sex with.
Now explain.
That's what he became. And he became a part of her story for a while.
Oh yeah,
In the show. When I say for a while, I think there was like a handful of episodes. But it was always a point of as a kid watching this with my mom is a little uncomfortable because I know what they were doing and what they were implying.
Oh yeah.
But this, if you're going to pick a moment in Voyager to parody, this is the one.
Oh,
this
absolutely.
is a thing.
That's why I always joke around with a lot of people and say, all right, why is it okay for Janeway to do this? But, Geordi does this and he gets shit all the time.
Well,
you fell in love with a hologram.
Geordi was a little creepy about it. It was a little creepy. Janeway.
Come on. Creepy. What about like looking at the hologram Mike and saying, make him an inch taller? Oh my God.
Janeway is a woman that was isolated. She had no sexual outlet. She tried, with Chakotay for early on. There seemed to be some sexual tension there. That faded once she got tired of him saying Akuche Moye continually.
Come with me to the Akuche Moye.
All right. So the next reference is the macrovirus, the exceptionally gross macrovirus that causes the lower decks heroes so much trouble. Hails from the Star Trek Voyager season 3 episode Macroism. The Doctor unintentionally brings the virus aboard the ship. Janeway proves to be the ship's only hope. The captain and Neelix are away on a diplomatic mission when the virus hits, and the rest of the crew, Neelix gets infected upon their return, but with the Doctor's help, Janeway manages to wipe out most of it.
Yes.
With an antigen bomb, right?
Yes.
That's what it was. All right, the next bit is the Neelix cheese. The same cheese Rutherford uses to stop the chaos on Voyager is from the Star Trek Voyager Season 1 episode Learning Curve. After the ship's bio-neural gel packs begin failing, we eventually learn the fault is with Neelix's cooking.
Yeah. And it was Neelix's cheese.
The clown.
This was my favorite that they brought this in.
This was always a very creepy and unsettling episode in Voyager.
To the very end.
So Star Trek Voyager's second season delivers perhaps the closest the franchise could ever get to replicating Stephen King's It.
Yes.
The crew finds a world upon which the sole survivors have plugged themselves into a computer program designed to keep their minds occupied while their planet heals. Very disturbing.
And that episode in itself is like probably one of my top 2 favorite, because like it is the one Star Trek episode in all of the franchise where the villain, you feel sorry for the villain in the very end, and the captain looks menacing. Like that moment, there's a very famous moment when Janeway and the clown are talking, and the clown basically says, "What's going to happen to me?" And Janeway basically says, "Nothing, you're just going to disappear." And he says, "I'm scared." And then the last phrase in the entire episode is Janeway looking at him and saying, "I know." And they fade to black.
Yeah.
And it's like it's one of those things that gave me chills when I first watched it, and I rewatched it a couple of years later, and it still holds up.
Yeah, it's good. Also, it has very strong philosophical underpinnings connected to Cartesian thought, because you're dealing with this idea of a reality that doesn't exist. Do you choose to remain in this reality even when you know it's not real? Harry's clarinet was another reference. Just like Riker had his trombone in Star Trek Voyager, Harry Kim had his clarinet.
And this is why he fails.
They also brought back the lizards. Star Trek's... This is such a fucking weird episode, dude.
That's why Voyager's so awesome.
Star Trek Voyager's Threshold is one of the most infamous episodes in the franchise. Tom Paris succeeds in breaking the warp 10 speed barrier, but as a result, he begins evolving into a reptile. Toward the end of the episode, he breaks the barrier again with Janeway in tow, and they essentially both de-evolve into this primordial state of evolution, and they mate and have lizard babies.
And remember, the funniest thing in that episode was actually Paris turning to Janeway saying that, oh, it's weird, we have children now, and what does it feel like to give birth to a different species? And then Janeway turns to him and says, how do you know that basically I was the one birthing the children?
Yeah.
I was like, that is Janeway basically saying, you're my bitch, Tom.
She also said, didn't she allude to the fact that she was the one that possibly instigated
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my girl.
That's my girl. That's my girl.
All right, Dr. Chaotica, which was always a fun character.
Yes.
Star Trek Voyager loved to dabble within the holodeck. They had numerous holodeck gone wrong episodes, similar to Star Trek The Next Generation. One of the most beloved episodes takes place in season 5 in the episode titled Bride of Chaotica. In the episode, which is mostly black and white. That's why one of the big reasons why I love it. The
Yeah.
heroes are forced to deal with Dr. Chaotica, the villain of Tom Paris's Captain Proton holodeck program. Not only is it just a cool way to have fun, you know, those seemingly simple episodes that they do. When you have 27 episodes to tell your story, you can have episodes like this. It's built off the mythos of Flash Gordon, essentially.
Yeah.
It's very pulpy in its origins.
And that's what made it really cool.
Yeah. The Borg nanites, of course, that's pretty much well known at this point. Those were the top references. All right, so overall, David, the most interesting part of the episode is the cliffhanger. That feels more appropriately unique to Lower Decks and is in itself a part of the narrative that seemingly relies on the writer's own unique inclusions to the Star Trek universe. And for all those that listen to this show, know by now that's really what I'm about. I'm less about Easter eggs. I'm less about nostalgia. I'm less about references and more about what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you offering in the vein of something new, unique, original that we've never seen? And it does seem to be more or less a narrative strand that will possibly be this season's so-called myth arc.
Yes.
For the last several seasons, or the last 3 seasons, it's been the Packlets. That storyline has come to an end. So it does seem like they're introducing something else.
Something
because
new.
that aspect where you see this vessel of unknown origins destroy a Klingon bird of prey, I believe is what it was.
Yeah.
And that's how the episode ends. And then the next episode starts. I also like the promotions from ensigns to lieutenants, junior grade lieutenants, right?
Yeah. That was one of the things I really liked because it felt like these characters are continuing to grow, you know? And that was one of the things that I was like kind of curious about, like what they would do with a new season of Lower Decks. Are they going to actually take a step up? Are there'll always be the Lower Decks crew, but it's nice to see some progression in their development.
Yeah, I agree. That to me was something I didn't expect, but I'm glad that there is some upward mobility for our Lower Decks crew because you keep hearing their Lower Decks, but they keep saving the day.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that type of progression for our characters, and we'll get into that a bit more during our discussion for episode 2. My overall thoughts, pretty much in a nutshell, I felt like this episode was not the strongest of episodes. It relied heavily on just nostalgic Star Trek references.
Yeah.
And as I said a few moments ago, that's just not my thing. I like things that are unique. What else are you going to do? What else are you going to bring to the table besides playing within, the derivative space, the derivative spaces that we've seen time and time again? I understand that Lower Decks, that's what they do, but it doesn't only need to be that. And in fact, the first season, I still think is the strongest season because they had their fair bits of reference / Easter eggs, but there was a lot of originality there. It feels like moving into season 3 and now season 4, they're falling into a very familiar pattern. And I'm hoping that's not what the show is always going to be, is simply references, because a show that's built simply on references where you're referencing not only the past, but also the immediate past, like Strange New Worlds and
Yeah.
Picard season 3, the show's going to become kind of stale.
Unfortunately,
you know,
yes.
if they don't continue to branch out and be something
Different.
else, you know, be their own show as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give this episode a 78%. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm a little bit more forgiving with this episode because I'm happy that they didn't seem to stall like they usually do in their beginnings of their seasons, that especially like last season where it was like, okay, where are you going with this? And I agree 100% with you that basically they have to do something different. I like all the references too. I even got more giddy about this episode just because you're touching on one of my favorite Star Trek series, which is Voyager. And they get a lot of the cool references. There was some good jokes that landed and then some jokes that didn't quite land. And in my opinion, that is like what a Lower Decks episode is kind of like a really quick, and that's the thing that I actually found really interesting. You get to the cliffhanger and I'm like going, man, that was a really fast episode. Like it ended really quickly. But I looked at it, I'm like, oh, but the time pretty went as long as you'd expect. So overall, I think it's one of their better openings. I'm interested where they're going with it. My score is a 83. I gave it an 83 because about 60% of their jokes landed, and the only thing that really saved the episode for me were the references. And I'm like you. When I look back at it, is that what we want out of Lower Decks? No, we like the character development of all these characters. We're getting really attached to these characters, and we want to see them move forward and get older and do something different. So I'm excited for the season. I like where it kicked off, but they got to really pick up the pace now.
Okay. All right. That brings us to the end. We'll be back shortly with a discussion on episode 2. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.